This conference will now be recorded.
All right, Mike, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank everybody for tuning in today. In researching all this stuff, I tried to get the best knowledge and the best facts I could get to everything. So if anybody knows anything any different or can add anything any way through here, don't hesitate, because I'm first to tell you I don't know all this, and a lot of this we get back into the big block stuff. There's a lot of little brackets that changed here and there, and it really gets kind of confusing. So if you need or you can help anyway, feel free to jump in. So that we'll get started here. Presentations done through the Indiana chapter this time, but I do both Indiana and Heart of Ohio stuff, so it's kind of for both chapters. We'll start off the 53s. The valve covers varied quite a bit from the passenger cars. One way is the hold down bolt was kind of recessed down in the cover for clearance from the hood. The oil fill cap was moved from the front of the valve cover on a passenger car about 2/3 of the way toward the back, and the front end of the valve cover was actually tapered for hood clearance. You can see why it had to be done for the hood clearance on the 53s, because if it went straight up there, it'd be into the hood. You can kind of see the oil cap back in there, just barely clears also. You can see here's a passenger comparison between the passenger car and the Corvette valve cover. You can kind of see that the hold down holes are more or less raised up on the passenger car, where they're recessed on the Corvette. You can see it a lot better there, and you can see where the oil cap was on the passenger car. The vent holes are pretty much in the same place. They're both kind of one at the front, one at the middle, one at the back on both valve covers there. It's kind of a close-up. You can see how it's recessed around the hold down bolt area. The 53s had a decal on both sides. This was on the driver's side. The passenger side had a little different blue flame on it with an arrow. The other thing that differentiated the 53 valve cover from the passenger car was the brackets put on to hold the ignition shielding. You can see kind of the long piece along both sides, and they did have a logo, manufacturer's logo, stamped underneath them, which is kind of hard to see. You can't really see it without a mirror, and you can't really get a very good picture of it. That was one of the other things that really differentiated it from the passenger car. In 54, they changed the head and the valve cover, the way they bolted on. It no longer bolted on from the top. It was bolted on around the perimeter in 4 areas. It was pretty much the same as the passenger car, other than the brackets for the ignition shielding. There was just a decal on the passenger side in 54. And here you can see the ignition shielding. It's a lot smaller than it was on the 53s. The 53 long piece would be where the where it bolts down to the head, so it really could not be the same as the 53s. And the 54s typically had a little bit of an offset in that outer bend on a original car. Midway through the 54s, there was some chrome valve covers in the middle of the run. There was no decals on these. Basically, they were the same as the stamped steel, just chrome plated. They also ran a few of them into the 55 6-cylinders. When you get into the 55 6-cylinders, you could have either a painted or a chrome valve cover. There wasn't any set way of putting them on, I guess. Here you can see the where it's bolted down and why the long brackets could not actually fit on the 54s the way they were on the 53s. The hold down screws were a slotted machine head screw with a little kind of a football shaped washer. In 55, we come out with the V8s. Most of the 55s had that V8 in it, and they were a stamped steel valve cover. They were chromed with the Chevrolet script across the top. They were a staggered, hold down bolt pattern. We'll get into that a little later back in here. All 55s had chrome valve covers on them.
Hey, Mike, quick question before you keep
Yep.
on going.
Yep.
With the cutaway that you showed with the tight clearance on the valve cover to the hood, was there any issues that you heard of with the heat from the valve cover causing problems with the paint on the hood?
Not that I'm really aware of, but I mean, the paint wasn't real great back in that day to start with. I know that it's a pretty tight clearance there, but I haven't really seen an original one that, you know, anything that was blistered or anything. So I'm not real sure. I don't, never heard of it, but there is possibility.
Okay. And did you mention the 54? Did that have the taper in the front?
No,
the
it was
cover?
pretty much straight. The 54s was pretty much straight. There's no taper on the front. I think everything was lowered just a little bit from the 53s. The mounting changed and it didn't have to set quite so high or something, but no, it wasn't tapered.
And then slide 13 with the chrome covers, you just passed it. Was that an option, or that
No.
they just put that on the car for a certain run?
For a certain time, they just put on chrome valve covers. As far as I know, it was not an option, no, and it was just in the middle of the 54 run, kind of the start of 54 had painted and the end of 54 had painted, and they were just kind of thrown in the middle for a while. I don't know why or anything. Can anybody else have any any comments on that or know anything more about that? Okay, we'll keep going then. I'll have to try and find out why, but I've never been able to find out anything on that of why they just went to the chrome one in the middle like that. The 55s was held on with a Phillips screw on the V8s. You can kind of see the little football washer down underneath it. There was no brackets on the 55s for temperature wires going up along the valve covers. In 56, they were the stamped steel valve cover. They were not chromed. They were painted engine color. And the Chevrolet script across the top was highlighted in silver. And we still are on the staggered bolt pattern for the hold down bolts. And there was brackets on these little clips to hold the temperature sensor wires going up along the driver's side. 56 optional motors got a cast aluminum valve cover. Early 56 intakes were shallow along this area right in here. The runners was small enough that there was not a need for a relief cut in here as there is, and later on you'll see around 1700 VIN number, they had to start cutting a relief in this area right here to clear the intake manifold runners coming down. But you can still see, you can see the staggered bolt pattern on this pretty good here too. They were a 9 fin in 56 and part of 57.
Mike, with slide 17, the chrome valve covers, do you know if those were installed and masked off for the painting?
No, I do not know. Here you can kind of see the relief cut in there for the intake runners. Maybe somebody knows if they were masked off or they just put on a different valve cover when they were painted. Can't really tell you that. Anybody can answer that, speak up. Okay, here you can see the hold down screw on the cast aluminum Phillip head. There was no washer underneath it, just went right onto the valve cover. 57, the base motors, stamped steel valve cover with staggered holes, and they had wire clips on there for the temperature sender. Early 57s may have had the Chevrolet highlighted in silver like the 56s did. Wasn't very long into 57 though that would have happened. 57, 9-fin cast aluminum was used on all motors to start with. The 9 rib was on all cars up to about 1900 VIN. Starting about 1900 VIN, with the fuel injected cars, they found out that the top rib on the 9 was actually, they had an issue with clearance for the air meter intake, so they had to start notching them, and they notched them from around 1900 to around 2900 VIN number. And the dual 4s actually carried the 9 ribs up till they ran out of stock on the 9-fin valve covers, but the fuel injected stopped after the 2900 and went to a 7 rib for the clearance issues. And here you can see a 9 rib with the relief cut in it for the air meter. A lot of cars, most cars just had it on the air meter side. Some cars had that relief cut on both sides or both valve covers. They went to the 7-fin then during the middle of the run there in 57. Like I said earlier, the 2-4 cars used the 9 fins until the supply ran out. All of the cast aluminum had what we call the low script up through 58. We'll get into that a little more later on. 58, 59, and 60 base motor cars all used the stamped steel, had the wire holders for the temperature gauge. From what I understand, 57s did not have horsepower ratings on the valve covers. They started in 58 with that. If anybody can tell me any different on that, but that's kind of the last I found on them. In 1958, the cast aluminum covers, they got a 290 horsepower decal on the passenger side, and that 58 was, I believe, the only year to use the 290 horsepower rating on the valve cover. And here we are, the difference between the low script and the high script. In 59, they went to the high script covers. And so in early 59, we still had staggered holes, and you had the high script on the valve covers. And midway through 59, June or July, the motors actually got to St. Louis to put in the cars. They started changing them over. I think it was in late May that they went to the straight valve covers, or the straight holes across for the mounting on the valve covers. And so early 59, you had staggered holes with high script. Mid 59, you had straight holes with high script. 58, you had staggered holes with the low script. So that's kind of the high script staggered holes was not produced that long a time, I guess. It was just the first probably 2/3 of 59. With all the cast aluminum valve covers, they had a little clip that went on where they screwed down to the heads that held the temperature sending wires, and I believe on most of the higher horsepower cars that ran up the passenger side rather than the driver's side like the lower horsepower cars. Somebody can tell me different on that, speak up. But I believe that's the way it was. The C1 stamped steel covers, the in slope was very steep compared to the passenger cars, and also the 67s had like a 10-degree slope on them, but the earlier C1 cars was really straight up and down. You can see it really good in this picture here. But yeah, one thing to check on a C1 base motor car is to look at the end of the valve cover. Real easy to tell the difference if you once see it. 61 stamped steel. The horsepower was on the side in gold. '61 cast aluminum. The decals were in red. '62, early '63, when we went to the 327 motor, they changed the stamped steel valve covers. They had like a little plateau in the middle. The label, the 327 Chevrolet Turbo Fire, is actually a thin metal with the 327 being raised. The 62.7 fin with the black and gold label, horsepower label on the side. And here's the stamped steel. The 62 and early 63s at the end of the plateau went kind of straight down into the shallow V across the top. Later 63 through 66, they kind of had a triangular kind of going down into the V on the top. So if you got an early 63, it should be straight down. Later 63 should have the taper. And they can see both of these do have still have the clips on for the temperature sender wire along the side. '63 or the base motors usually did not have a 250 horsepower decal on the covers. The 300 horsepower did have the decal on them. And I don't know how many people seen the thread on this here not too long ago about the O stamped on these. There is an O stamped on them. It is kind of in the area of like about right in this area, like see my pointer here, and it is a very light stamping. A good chance if you put 2 good coats of paint over it, you're going to cover that thing up to where it's almost able to see it. But there is an O stamped on them if you look at them very closely. Here's a 63 327 300 horser. You can see both sides. 63, they went from a Phillips screw to a hex head screw, and you can see it as a recessed head, or around the top of the head here, it is kind of recessed down in. And here you can kind of see the label on the top. I believe this particular one is off of a passenger car because it has the 250 horsepower label on the side. But you can kind of see the 327 here. You can kind of see it is raised on that thin metal piece. 63 cast aluminum. You can see the hold down bolts are still the Phillips on this end, or this part right here right now. Early 63s, they had the Phillips on them. Later, they went to the hex head bolt with the kind of the recess in the head right in here. The decal on the 64, 65, 375 horse, black with the gold. '65, they come out with the big blocks. Now, in '65, you can see there's a taper on this valve cover here. That's for clearance for power brake. It was on all big block cars, whether they had power brakes or not. You can also see there's a bracket in the middle of both valve covers to hold the plug wires, and also on the passenger side there's a raised bracket to kind of hold the wires at the back. '66 small block stamped steel valve cover. And the label kind of changed on these in mid '66. They went to the horsepower rating was right on the label. It did not have the raised 327 on it like it did before. I think probably most 66s had this label. Just very earlier ones may have still had the old style. In '66, about somewhere around VIN 17,000, the flaw appeared into the O. '66, the 427s. For a short time in '66, they put this relief in for air conditioning on the lower horsepower big blocks. It was found that it wasn't really needed, so it was eliminated. And you can also see the brackets for the plug wires on the top, on both sides in the middle. There's one at the back on the passenger side. The driver's side, you can see the indentation for the power brake booster clearance. It was kind of on a taper up until like '68. They are all basically tapered the same way. Here's a '66 without the relief for the air conditioning. You can see the brackets basically are still in the same spot. The hold down bolts, in '66, they changed from a recess head to a flat head. You can see right here. A '67 small block base motor car. I don't really have a good picture of the taper back in here, but you can kind of see there is just a little bit of a taper. It's not straight up and down like it was on the C1s, and it's not tapered as severely as it is on the passenger cars. That's kind of the best picture I had, one of the slope, and you can kind of see it here on this one. There is just a little bit of a slope on the 67s. '67 big blocks. You can see basically it still had the taper in for the power brake booster. The brackets are still in the middle for the plug wire, and they also added the Tonawanda sticker up front on the passenger side. If that sticker is on top of the paint, that's wrong, because it was put on, there was a little piece over the top of it that peeled off after they painted, so it should be right flush with the paint actually on the valve cover. You kind of see it a little better there. Stop now if there's any questions or anybody's got any more comments. They can add anything or tell me what I said wrong, or anything you can add at all. Speak up.
And Mike, on slide 52, when you talked about the casting flaw through the Chevrolet script, any idea why that was never fixed?
I think they done away with them in '67, and they felt probably it wasn't worth redoing the casting for just that rest of '66 and '67, because they changed the valve covers in '68 then.
Okay. And then there was mention.
That's just kind of what I assume off of it. I don't know if anybody else knows for sure, but that's what I've come off with.
And then there's a comment, not specific to any slide, but just kind of a note that there's a thinner edge on original valve covers compared to the edge on reproduction.
Yeah, there's also more flaws in the reproductions than there was in the original. Around the edges, I mean, the originals are pretty smooth and pretty consistent, where a lot of the reproductions have inconsistencies in them and are sharp.
And then Joe mentioned on 67, they added a support to the driver's side near the distributor.
Okay, yeah, right in this area right here.
And then any comments on original versus reproduction Tonawanda sticker? If there's a way to tell the difference?
Just kind of basically how, if they're put on top of the paint, it's not original, because they were put right on the bare metal and then painted over, and then the top part of there was like a protection piece on there that was peeled off, and so it should be pretty much flat with the paint. Is that right, Mr. Ballard?
That's correct.
And slide 58 that you're on, were there any markings on the hold down bolts?
I'm sure there was some head markings on them, but I think there was a couple different head markings was probably originally used, because I pretty sure them bolts was used in some various other places also.
And then do you know, for 67 L88 engines, are those valve covers any different than other big blocks in 67?
I'm trying to think here. I know somewhere along the line the 435 and the 430 horse got chromed ones, but I don't remember whether that was 67 or 68. I'd have to go back and do some looking here. Like I said, there's so much, this big block change, there are so many small little changes in them that it's really hard to keep up with.
Mm-hmm. And then also on this slide, are there signs that of the drippers being spot welded onto the cover?
There should be, but in most cases, when people redo them and repaint them, they kind of cover them up, or a lot of cases, the spot welds weren't real distinct. In some cases, they stick out more than others, I guess.
And then just a clarification on the Tonawanda sticker. So if you were to run your finger across it, the paint is thick enough where it's, there's no lip to feel for the sticker. That's correct?
It should be fairly smooth across there. It should be not very much of a variance in the height.
And somebody commented all 67 L88 valve covers were painted.
Okay.
And then on 66 big block, any more info about the dates of the AC relief?
From what I've found, it ran from approximately sometime in November to sometime in January. So I don't know where the VIN numbers run on that area. I'd have to go back and look and see, but it was like 3-month run, and there's where they put them in there. I suppose that it took an extra machining or stamping, so they probably, if they didn't need it, they done away with that to save money.
And then on 63 through 66, the decals, do you know if those are just stickers or are they water-based adhesion? And if there is a difference, is there a deduction for judging if you can tell the difference?
Which stickers are they talking about? The 327 is kind of a thin foil that's on top of the plateau. The horsepower stickers on the side are kind of a water soluble that's stuck to the kind of the side of the valve cover.
Okay. So I'm
The
assuming, yeah, so I assume if it's not a water soluble, it's a reproduction. If it's a regular sticky sticker, I mean, that's a small enough component of the overall valve cover that may not justify a point deduction. Is that what you would think?
I would think of, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty minor, it might be noted and not deducted. That's kind of up to the person doing the judging, but personally, I would not deduct. I just kind of mention it.
Okay, somebody mentioned, let's see, 67 to L89, only 16 were made and had chrome covers.
Okay.
And then 67 big block valve cover bolts were RBW stamped.
Okay.
And then somebody mentioned they have original big block valve cover stickers. The reproductions are different. And that's all I'm showing for chat comments. If anybody else wants to unmute their mics and ask a question, go ahead.
Or if you got any comments, speak up. Okay, I guess we'll kind of mosey on then. 68 still had the 327 in it. The valve covers did not have the script on top anymore, just kind of a flat piece across the top. The higher horsepower cars got a chrome valve cover rather than having the painted valve covers like the base motor in 68. Still, there was no script or anything across the top. It was just basically a chromed stamped steel cover. Okay, early 68 big block valve cover. We still had the taper at the back corner for the brake booster. The plug wires holders was out in the middle. It basically was about the same valve cover as a 67. There was a second style that come around that moved the bracket back a little bit on the passenger side. And it also changed on the driver's side where the taper was going on, it was not on an angle anymore. It was pretty much tapered clear across, but they had to extend this out for the dripper to fit in underneath. That was the second style in 58. I'm not sure when that changed or what VIN number approximately that changed at, but then the third style, I believe, started in 69. It still had the little bump out for the drippers underneath, but the wire holder was moved from back and moved up in front of the bolt hole, I believe, on the driver's side. And in this particular, you can see where the drippers were spot welded to the valve cover on this one pretty good, even through the chroming. You can see the Tonawanda sticker, what's left of it on that valve cover there. On the other side, on the chrome ones, they just were stuck on top. 68. Okay, this is on the passenger side. The bracket was moved back from center on the big block. So I said the 68, 69, there are so many variations through here that it's hard to keep up. The fourth style, they lost the bump for the dripper. The bracket for the plug wires was still moved forward. Other than that, everything was pretty much, they just lost the bump more or less. And here you can kind of see the drippers underneath and how when they changed the taper back in here, that dripper sticking back here, that's why they had to put the bump out, because when they tapered the thing clear across, it was right into that area. Before I go on, is anybody else, or can anybody comment on any of these big block valve covers in 68, 69? Because I know it's hard for me to keep it straight when they changed and what all they changed, I guess. Nobody's got any comments, I guess we'll move on. In 69, basically the valve cover was very similar to the 68, with the exception they had to put a oil fill cap on because they done away with the oil fill in the intake manifold. It was moved to the valve cover. Other than that, the 68, 69 valve covers were pretty much alike on the base motors. And 69, instead of having just the chrome stamped steel valve cover put on the blocks, they went back to a cast aluminum fin type valve cover. You can see here that the oil fill is still on the driver's side, but on the passenger side, rather than having an opening there, they put a Corvette emblem basically to plug the hole. So they did not have to have basically two castings for the valve covers. '69 L88 chrome valve covers. '70 base motor, about like the '69s, had the oil cap in the driver's side. I think you can pretty much tell this is an original car. Late '69, '70 big block valve covers. You can see the driver's side, the little bumps missing out, sticking out there, and the bracket is moved forward there. A '71 LS6 motor. Stamped steel valve cover. You can see instead of having a twist in oil cap, we now have a rubber push in.
Hey, Mike, real quick.
Yep.
Slide 70, those valve covers, you can go to that one. Were those the same that were used on, let's see, the 302 Z28 engine?
I would venture to say they probably were. I can't really answer that for sure, but they look a lot like the ones that was on them.
Okay.
I don't know what they did about the emblem here as far as the 302s.
That's slide 74. Any idea why there was no cut on the driver's side for clearing the power brake booster?
it evidently was deemed that it wasn't necessary to have that there anymore. I don't know if the when they changed to the Sharks, if they moved the clearance over far enough that they finally decided they didn't need it in there anymore or what. I don't know if anybody's got any answer for that one. Okay. 71, they started using the rubber oil plug rather than the twist-in metal ones. Probably wasn't such a great idea, seeing how they all started deteriorating and falling apart after a few years of heat. From what I understand, there was the two different lengths of oil plugs. One of them was basically used more by the Flint plant, and the other one was more or less used by the Tonawanda plant. A lot of the valve or a lot of the oil plugs was in the valve covers when they were painted, so they were painted right along with them.
Hey, Mike, do you know if the early 71s still have the twist-in cap?
It's probably a possibility. I can't really say for sure, but I know in 71s when they changed over to the rubber, and I'm sure there was probably a lag time where they were both used for a little while. I don't know, can anybody clarify that any better? Oh, we got to have some 71 guys around here that knows a little more than this.
And yes, the early 71s, especially L21s, did have these twisting caps.
Okay. '72 base motor, stamped steel again. You can see the clamp. They had little brackets on there for wires on both sides. And, see the difference between the oil fill hole where the push ends compared to the twist ends, and the one on the right is a later style motor or cover due to the brackets on the top there are a lot different than the earlier ones. You can see here late 73, 74, 75, the bracket on this particular side moved from in front to the back of the hole up here. In the later 73s, the early 73s still had the bracket in front. The 73, 74 big block, the bracket on top where the plug wires was on the earlier cars. Before I go there, you can kind of see on this one, there is still some paint remnants on the oil cap here. Pictures there. But the plug wires went from on top to the side of the valve cover. And there was a bracket on top for the sensor wires. They had a sticker on the back with the engine suffix code, but most of them fell off after driving the car not very long. They were just stuck on and basically disintegrated or fell off after a few times of heating the motor.
Those should be yellow and black. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then one other quick question on the rubber caps. A lot of owners are reluctant to remove them during judging because they're fragile. I can't remember, is that even something that needs to be removed during judging?
It it should not have to be removed because there's nothing in there you can see. The only thing you can tell maybe is on the bottom side of some of the caps there was some markings, I believe. But as far as having to remove it, I don't think you should have to remove it for judging. Mr. Ballard, can you elaborate on that any? You're not supposed to remove them, are you?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
Probably pull off, ruin the damn thing if you take it off too much.
Yep. Okay. Hope that answered the question. 76 base motor car. In late August, early September 76, the color changed from orange to blue. '78, the higher horsepower cars got aluminum valve cover, and the fins on top were machined rather than the valve cover was painted, and then they were machined. So you should be able to see some machining marks on them if you look real close. Whereas in the 82s, they were made of magnesium, and the tops were painted off-white to a pale color rather than being machined. And you can see on this particular one, there's still a sticker on this particular valve cover. I imagine if you drove the car very much, them would fall off also. '84, went to a die-cast magnesium. I had an epoxy crinkle coating, kind of a gray color. The '84s had a black C4 emblem in the opening that was not used for the oil fill. '85, they were more natural aluminum looking with a totally different plug basically on the hole for the oil fill tube. The bottom side of the later ones, you can kind of see they did put kind of like some drippers on the bottom side. They were molded right into the casting. '86, they went from bolting them around the outer perimeter edges to bolting them down through the middle of the top. You can see the emblem on the '86 here was a lot just like the C4 Corvette emblem. And they went to the hold downs in the middle of the valve cover when they went to the aluminum heads on the cars. You can see they had the dripper still in these also. You can see the pieces where they bolted down through was clear down almost to the head. Here's the bolts that was used to hold down the valve covers in the from '86 to I think it was '91, '92 range. The emblem that plugged the hole changed 90 to 91. It went from the red back in here to black. '91, '92, they changed over to the newer motor, and the valve covers changed a little bit. The ZR1s had a totally different, like, for lack of better say, it's really not a valve cover, so to speak. It is a valve cover, but it's a lot different than than what we normally look at on a valve cover. In 90, the emblem was different. They changed the red in 90 and the black in 91, even on the ZR1s. '93, they were no longer made out of metal, either steel, stamped steel, or aluminum. They went to a plastic valve cover. The hold down bolts for the later ones, and you can kind of see there's a rubber washer that they went down against to seal them. The bottom side, you can see there's no drippers in these. Valve, or the oil plug. The later C-5s had an aluminum valve cover back, and they had brackets for mounting the coil packs on top of them. You can see the mounting bosses here for the coil packs. The bottom side. And the bolts that held them down. And that's my last slide. So any comments, or anybody can correct anything I said wrong, or anything else anybody wants to add, please speak up.
Yeah, a few chat comments, and then we can open it up for people to unmute. Slide number 91. All right, the comment was for 92, they changed to the LT1. Shouldn't that slide title be up through 91?
Yeah, probably. Up to 92, so yeah.
Okay. And then another comment, you did not address the yellow and black stickers on the back of the early 65 to 69 big block valve covers. They are supposed to be there, correct? Stickers on the back of the 65 to 69 big block.
I'm sure they was on a lot more cars than what are on now, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of them, that they put them on there so they knew what the motor was at St. Louis when they went to put them in the cars. I'm not sure what all years got them. I'm sure there was a lot of years that got them that probably nobody even knew that they were there. But I can't really say. I presume they were there then.
Okay, and then somebody asked if you can just give a quick explanation of what the drippers were used for on the underside of the valve covers.
It was basically to, the oil would kind of come off of that and go down into the rocker arms. It was just kind of to help the rocker arm, the little kind of bowl-shaped washer in there that the rockers went back and forth on. It just kind of helped lubricate that area.
And then somebody made a mention, cam covers on the ZR1. I don't know if there's anything you could expand on that. There's no slide reference.
Sorry,
no, this is Chris. That's just a comment. They're referred to as cam covers as opposed to valve covers.
Yeah.
Because the cams are riding right underneath those covers.
Correct. I said they're not really, they're kind of a valve cover, but they're not really a valve cover. I guess they were called cam covers. So, but yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
And there was a comment for 78 to 80, the L82 had the black with the fins, and then the 81
Went to the magnesium.
it had the magnesium, and then the 82 had the same valve cover, but the oil fill on the 82 had a filler neck.
Okay.
And then question, still magnesium in 89 or up to 93?
They were magnesium till they went to the plastic in in 93 they went to the plastic. Up to that point they were still the magnesium.
Okay, and that's the end of the check questions. If anybody else has any questions, you can unmute yourself.
Gary Dukeman, 9173. On your 67 big block with AIR, there was a bracket welded on the passenger side valve cover to hold the diverter valve.
Yeah, I tried to find one of them and I couldn't.
I'll try to get an email. I'll send you a picture of one then so you have it for future reference.
I'd appreciate it a lot. Like I said, a lot of this stuff I got gobs of pictures, but yeah, you can't have everything.
Very, very hard valve cover to find.
I know. I've seen one. Anybody else got any comments or anything to add? Well, I appreciate everybody that signed in today, and I hope you got maybe a little bit out of this. And I hope I didn't give you 2 minutes wrong stuff. I try not to, but I'm sure that happens. So I'm glad everybody signed in, and that's the end of it. And have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Thanks,
Well
Mike.
done.
Great
Thank you,
job,
Mike.
Mike.
Great job
Thanks
as
a lot.
usual, Mike and Nick.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.